It feels like just yesterday we were cracking open cheap champagne, huddled around a projector in a cramped office that smelled faintly of old pizza and sheer desperation. That was years ago. Years of breathing Synapse solutions into existence. Years of 80-hour weeks, of missed holidays, of ramen dinners eaten hunched over keyboards. It wasn't just a job. It was a piece of my soul, molded with my own two hands alongside Daniel. We were partners, co-founders, building a B2B secure data integration platform that we genuinely believed would change things. And we did. Just last week, we closed the Apex Corp deal, a $15 million annual recurring revenue contract. It was the Everest we'd been climbing, the validation of every late night, every technical hurdle I'd personally wrestled to the ground. Everyone was celebrating. Except, I guess, for Daniel. I sat across from him at the large, polished conference table, the same table where I'd sketched out the initial architecture of the Nexus engine on napkins, where we'd celebrated seed funding with lukewarm coffee. His suit looked expensive, pressed to perfection, a stark contrast to the slightly too casual shirt I was wearing because I'd been debugging a critical client sync issue at 3 in the morning. He didn't look triumphant, or even tired. He looked detached. Clinical. "Riley," he started, his voice smooth, too smooth. "We've reached a point where Synapse needs to evolve its leadership structure." My stomach clenched, a cold knot forming instantly. Evolve? What does that mean, Daniel? He leaned back, a half-smile playing on his lips that didn't reach his eyes. "It means for this next phase, scaling to enterprise level, dealing with, the big leagues, we need someone with a different profile. Someone with more traditional corporate experience. More polished." He actually said, polished. To me. To the person who wrote 90% of the core code running the platform he just sold for $15 million a year. Polished. I repeated flatly, my voice tight. "And you don't think I am?" "Riley, you're brilliant technically. Absolutely indispensable in the early days," he conceded, as if talking about a particularly useful piece of legacy software. "But frankly, you were never the only reason we got this far. And leading at this scale requires a different skill set. We need someone who understands corporate optics, stakeholder management on a global level. We've decided to bring in Mitchell Davison as head of engineering, reporting directly to me. He has decades of experience at established tech giants." It hit me like a physical blow. Not just being fired, but the utter dismissal of my contribution. The rewriting of our shared history right in front of my face. Indispensable in the early days? I just fixed a critical bug in the Nexus engine last week that saved the Apex deal from collapsing before we signed it. I swallowed past the sudden lump in my throat. "So you're firing me?" "Restructuring," he corrected, the half-smile unwavering. "It's not personal, Riley. It's just business. We'll provide a severance package, of course. And we wish you all the best. Not personal. 8 years of my life, my health, my relationships, poured into this, and it wasn't personal." I felt the floor tilting, the room spinning slightly. But years of pushing through impossible technical problems had taught me one thing: maintain composure when everything is breaking. "Understood," I managed, my voice surprisingly steady. I stood up. Daniel was already looking back at his laptop, probably drafting the internal announcement about the smooth leadership transition. He didn't even look up to say goodbye. Walking out of that room felt like walking out of my own skin. The glass walls of the office seemed to amplify the cheerful buzz from the team celebrating the Apex deal. Engineers I'd hired and mentored were heads down in code I'd written. Mark from sales waved cheerfully from his desk, probably still buzzing from the big win. Chloe from client success was on a call, laughing with a client. They had no idea. No idea that the person who built the engine powering their success was being quietly erased. My small office area had already been cleared. Just a single cardboard box. Inside, my favorite ceramic mug, a framed photo of Daniel and me from our first pitch competition, back when he called me his technical guru, and a worn notebook filled with my scribbled diagrams for the Nexus engine's initial architecture. That was it. 8 years, reduced to one small box. But what Daniel didn't know, what he'd been too arrogant and too dismissive to ever truly grasp, was that while he was focused on the shiny facade, I was meticulously documenting the foundation, not just for Synapse, but for me. My mentor, Sophia, a fiercely independent woman who'd lost her business in a hostile takeover fueled by IP disputes, had drilled it into me. Always have your receipts, Riley. Especially for what's fundamentally yours. The Nexus engine, the heart of Synapse's unique offering, was largely built by me before Synapse was even formally a company. We had agreements, yes, but the intricate details, the specific optimizations, the core underlying IP, that was a gray area Daniel had never bothered to clarify, despite my attempts. I had the original code commits with timestamps, the early design documents, the email threads where I'd warned him about the need for better internal documentation and training for the core systems, only for him to dismiss it as not a priority right now, we'll scale first. He thought he could just bring in someone polished and plug them into the system I built. He was about to find out that you can't manage what you don't understand, and you can't replace the architect with a caretaker. I got into my car, the small box on the passenger seat like a silent witness. The shock began to recede, replaced by a cold, hard anger. But beneath the anger was a quiet, simmering resolve. It wasn't just about being fired. It was about being devalued, erased, and lied about. I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was thinking about recognition. About reality. I started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, Synapse Solutions receding in the rearview mirror. I picked up my phone and called Eleanor, my lawyer. It's done, I said, my voice low but steady. Okay, Eleanor replied, her voice calm and measured as always. Did he give a reason? I repeated Daniel's words about needing more polished leadership. Eleanor was silent for a beat. And the IP? The Nexus engine documentation? The pre-incorporation work? I have everything, I confirmed. Every commit, every email, every diagram. Sophia's lesson stuck. Good, she said. Don't do anything. Don't contact anyone. Just exist for a while. Let them feel the gap you left. We'll talk strategy tomorrow. This isn't the end, Riley. It's just the beginning of a different story. The following weeks were strange. A forced detox from the all-consuming world of Synapse. I went to sleep before midnight, woke up without an urgent Slack notification, rediscovered what weekends felt like. The first few days were filled with phantom urges to check dashboards or respond to imaginary crises. But slowly, the quiet seeped in. It was peaceful, but laced with an undeniable tension, like the air before a thunderstorm. Daniel didn't contact me. The board was silent. It seemed Daniel's narrative of a smooth transition had held, at least initially. I was a ghost. But then the whispers started. Sophia called me one afternoon. Riley, are you seeing this? There's chatter in the industry. Daniel's people are putting out feelers, subtle stuff, suggesting you weren't a good fit for scaling. Lacked leadership vision. The smear campaign had begun. It stung, a petty, unnecessary lie that twisted the knife. Let them talk, I told Sophia, though my jaw was tight. Let's see if their polished leadership can keep the lights on. My detachment couldn't last forever. A few days later, my phone buzzed. A text from Mark from sales. Hey Riley, sorry to bother, hope you're doing well. Quick cue about the Apex integration, getting some weird sync errors on their end. Mitchell seems swamped and we can't figure out the right config. Any quick pointers? Apex. The multi-million-dollar deal. The system I built. I stared at the text. Mitchell was struggling. Good. I didn't reply. The next day, Chloe from Client Success. Hi, Riley. Things are getting a bit hectic here. Clients are reporting weird data discrepancies in the dashboard, especially after the last deployment. Mitchell and his team are swamped with support tickets. Any chance you know where the specific fallback scripts for the enterprise dashboard analytics are stored? Mitchell says he can't locate the right version. More problems. More proof. And they were asking me. Then Ethan, the junior engineer I'd mentored, a bright kid straight out of college. His text was hesitant, almost apologetic. Hey, Riley, I know this is out of line, but things are really rough here. Mitchell doesn't understand the core system architecture at all, keeps changing things that break other stuff. The team is stressed, working crazy hours, getting blamed for things we can't fix because we don't have the knowledge. People are talking about leaving. Just thought you should know. It's chaos. Chaos. The company I poured my life into was descending into chaos. And the polished leader Mitchell, the supposed expert, was breaking it piece by piece and blaming the team. The irony was thick enough to choke on. A part of me ached for my former colleagues, for the dream turning sour. But a stronger part felt a cold, hard satisfaction. Daniel chose this. The crisis escalated rapidly. The technical issues with Apex Corp weren't just sync errors anymore. I got a direct, urgent email from Apex's head of technology, copied to their legal team. Subject: urgent. Critical data integrity issues and potential security vulnerability, Synapse Solutions platform. The email detailed significant data discrepancies and a potential vulnerability linked to the core integration layer, my Nexus engine. They stated they were halting further use of the platform and were reviewing the contract, with potential legal action for damages and non-compliance with security standards if not resolved immediately. Losing Apex Corp wouldn't just be a blow. It could be fatal for Synapse Solutions, especially given their focus on secure data. I forwarded the email to Eleanor with a single line. It's worse than we thought. Apex is pulling out. Eleanor called within minutes. Her voice was crisp. Okay, Riley. This changes things. The waiting game is almost over. He has to call now. And when he does, we're ready. The whispers in the industry grew louder. Tech blogs started reporting on Synapse's unexpected technical difficulties and client churn. Daniel's attempt to smear me was being overshadowed by the undeniable reality of his failing product. And then the calls from Daniel started. The first few days were tentative. Texts like, "Hi Riley, hope you're well. Could really use a quick consultation regarding some platform issues. Happy to compensate you generously." Generously. The man who said I was replaceable. I forwarded it to Eleanor. Her reply: let him sweat. Generosity goes up with desperation. The messages escalated. Urgent. Apologetic. Look, Riley. I might have been harsh. Pressure, you know how it is. Things are rough here. Really rough. Mitchell's struggling with your systems. Can you help? Name your price. Even got my name wrong in his panic. Jess. He was thinking of Jessica from the original story, maybe? Or just scrambling. Either way, it highlighted his detachment. I waited until Sunday. Then I replied, "Hi Daniel. I'm currently busy with other engagements. Cannot take on new work right now, but I appreciate the offer. Hope things at Synapse are going well." Polite. Non-committal. Deadly. My phone rang instantly. It was Daniel. I took a deep breath and answered. "Riley. Thank God. Did you get my message?" His voice was tight with desperation. "I did, Daniel," I said calmly, sipping the tea I'd just made. "As I said, I'm quite busy." "Busy? Riley, the company is, we're in trouble. Big trouble. Mitchell can't figure out the Nexus engine architecture. Clients are leaving. Apex Corp is threatening legal action. We need you. I'm offering 6 figures for a short-term contract. Just fix it. 6 figures. For a short contract." The irony was almost overwhelming. "That's very generous, Daniel," I said, letting the silence hang for a moment. "But I have to ask, didn't you say I was never the reason Synapse got this far?" Silence on the other end. A rugged sigh. I may have underestimated your role, Riley. Severely. Look, I messed up. Just, please, help us." I let the silence stretch again, letting him hang in the space between his past arrogance and his present pleading. "Let me think about it," I finally said. And I hung up. Without saying goodbye. That night, I met Eleanor for dinner. I recounted the call, the panic in Daniel's voice, the offer, my response. "He's desperate," I said, swirling the wine in my glass. But not desperate enough to admit he was wrong publicly. Yet, Eleanor corrected, a slight smirk on her face. "Give it time. A few more lost clients, a few more sleepless nights for the board, and he'll be ready to sing your praises just to survive." I wasn't really looking at the menu. I don't want to go back there, not really. Not to work for him. But I want them to admit it. I want them to need me. "They already do," Eleanor said, meeting my gaze. "They just needed to hit rock bottom to realize it. Your value isn't just in building the system, Riley. It's in being the only one who truly understands its heart. That's power. And for the first time since that cold meeting, I felt it. Not anger, not sadness, not even just satisfaction. Power. Quiet, solid power, built not on aggression or manipulation, but on undeniable truth and competence. I had built something they couldn't replicate or understand. And now, they were trapped by their own dismissal of it. I was just getting started. Another couple of weeks passed. The situation at Synapse Solutions continued to deteriorate. The public murmurs turned into louder complaints on industry forums. It wasn't just clients now. Former employees who had left due to the chaos were starting to talk anonymously online about the unmanageable legacy system and the disaster under new management. Daniel's attempts to silence or spin the narrative were failing. Then, a new kind of message arrived. Not from a desperate employee or client, but from an investor. Subject: Quick chat re, Synapse Solutions. From Aurora Vance at Bright Edge Capital, one of our key Series A investors. I remembered Aurora well. Sharp, pragmatic, rarely spoke in meetings, but when she did, everyone listened. If Aurora was reaching out, it wasn't for gossip. It was serious. I opened the email. Hi Riley. Hope you're doing well. I'm looking into some concerning reports regarding Synapse Solutions, platform stability, and recent client churn. Given your foundational role in the original architecture, I'd appreciate 20 minutes of your time this week for a confidential conversation. Strictly off the record, of course. She was investigating, and she knew where the real answers were. I forwarded the email to Eleanor. Her response was immediate. Talk to her. Be truthful about what you built, especially the pre-incorporation IP. Stick to your expertise and the historical facts. No need to violate NDA on current operations, but your foundational work is fair game. This is it. We scheduled a video call with Aurora. When she appeared on screen, she was exactly as I remembered. Sharp eyes, professional demeanor, no-nonsense energy. Riley, she said with a polite, assessing look. Thank you for taking the time. I won't waste yours. Of course, Aurora. I hear Synapse has had a challenging few weeks. She gave a tight nod. That's an understatement. We've seen significant client losses, including Apex Corporation. Our due diligence indicated the platform was robust and the technology transferable. Clearly, something is not right. She paused, looking directly at me. We've received conflicting reports regarding the core architecture, specifically the data integration and security layer, the Nexus engine, I believe it's called. We were told it was fully documented and manageable internally. But the reality seems to be different. Frankly, it appears the current team has no fundamental understanding of how it works or how to fix it when it breaks. I chose my words carefully. The Nexus engine was indeed a core component. I designed and built the initial framework myself. From scratch. Aurora pressed. Yes. Largely before Synapse Solutions was formally incorporated. It was a personal project, a solution I'd been developing based on needs I saw in the market. When Daniel and I decided to build Synapse around that concept, I integrated it, refined it, built upon it. And the documentation? I provided extensive documentation for its integration into the broader platform and for standard operations, I said, being truthful but precise. However, the deeper logic, the specific optimizations for performance and security, the troubleshooting pathways for complex edge cases, that knowledge was primarily with me. I raised the need for more in-depth internal training and documentation multiple times over the years, but it wasn't prioritized. Aurora leaned forward slightly. Daniel's representation to the board and investors was that the technology was fully transferable and that your role, while key in implementation, wasn't critical to its ongoing maintenance or strategic evolution. I felt a cold wave of anger at the blatant lie, but kept my voice level. That's an interesting perspective. I have code commits for the core Nexus engine repository dating back a year, before Synapse received its first angel investment. I have the original design documents, the whiteboard photos with my handwriting outlining the fundamental architecture before we even had a formal pitch deck. I also have email records documenting my concerns about the lack of internal redundancy for this critical system. Aurora's expression didn't change much, but her eyes sharpened. So, Is it accurate to say that the absolute core of Synapse's technology relies on a system only you fundamentally understand, one that predates your formal employment? Yes, I confirmed. The Nexus engine, the part handling secure integration and core data processing that's causing the current issues. Yes, that's accurate. We sat in silence for a moment. Riley, Aurora said finally, her tone shifting from investigative to strategic. The board is holding an urgent meeting later this week. There are serious questions about leadership, technical viability, and potential misrepresentation. We need to understand the truth of the situation fully. We would like you and your counsel to attend. Strictly as observers if you prefer, but prepared to answer direct questions. This was it. The moment the truth would be laid bare before the people who held Synapse's fate in their hands. I'll need to consult with Eleanor, I replied, maintaining my composure. After the call, my hands were trembling slightly, but inside, a familiar fire was burning. It was the same feeling I had the night Daniel and I first decided to go all in, the day we got our first small angel check. It wasn't anger or fear. It was the fierce, protective energy of someone whose creation was under threat and who finally had the power to defend it. I called Eleanor immediately. Aurora Vance just invited us to the board meeting. I expected as much, Eleanor said. They've realized they can't fix it without you, and they can't understand why they can't fix it without understanding what was truly built. This is where Daniel's lies catch up to him. She said observer, I said, but we both know they'll ask questions. And you'll have answers, Eleanor finished. The kind that dismantle Daniel's narrative piece by piece. Okay, Riley. We prepare. We bring the receipts. All of them. Friday arrived with a gray sky and a nervous energy buzzing in my veins. Eleanor and I arrived at Bright Edge Capital's impressive downtown offices 20 minutes early. Eleanor was impeccably dressed in a sharp suit, carrying a slim leather folder that felt heavy with the weight of proof. Remember, Eleanor said as we walked towards the glass doors, her voice low and steady. You're not here for revenge. You're here for recognition, for truth, and for leverage. Let the facts speak for themselves. I nodded, trying to project a calmness I didn't entirely feel. My heart hammered against my ribs. The conference room was hushed but crackled with tension. Around a long table sat Aurora and two other Bright Edge partners, along with a representative from another investment firm. Across from them were Daniel, Mitchell, and two members of the Synapse Solutions Board, their faces etched with stress and lack of sleep. Daniel's eyes widened in shock the moment he saw me. He clearly hadn't been warned. Riley, he said, forcing a strained smile. I didn't realize you'd be joining us. I was invited, I replied smoothly, walking past him to take the seat Aurora indicated beside her, slightly separate from the main table, the designated observer spot. Mitchell looked down at the table, refusing to meet my gaze. Aurora opened the meeting, stating the agenda was to discuss company performance, technical stability, and leadership. But the real topic hung in the air like a thick fog: accountability. As you know, Aurora began calm but firm. Synapse Solutions has experienced significant challenges over the past month. A 17% drop in enterprise usage, major client churn including Apex Corp, support wait times quadrupling, and concerning reports about internal team morale and turnover. Our analysis points directly to systemic instability, particularly within the core data integration layer. Daniel shifted in his seat, trying to project confidence. We are fully aware of the issues. Mitchell and his team are working diligently to stabilize the platform and implement redundancies. With all due respect, Daniel, one of the other investors interjected, his voice sharp, progress reports have been vague, and the problems persist. We're hearing the same thing from our contacts within the company and former employees. The core system is not understood by the current team. They say, that system was built by Riley Hill. My name, spoken in that tense room, landed like a gavel. Daniel opened his mouth, likely to trot out his old narrative, but I spoke first, my voice clear and even. I won't comment on Synapse Solutions' current operations, as I am no longer employed there. However, I can confirm that the fundamental architecture of the Nexus engine, including its core integration protocols, security framework, and underlying data processing logic, was designed, developed, and implemented by me. I wrote the original codebase and established its foundational structure. Aurora nodded. We have reviewed documentation provided by Ms. Hale. It is extensive, time-stamped, and appears to verify her claims regarding the foundational development. Daniel leaned forward, his tone shifting from strained confidence to barely concealed aggression. With all due respect, Ms. Vance, Riley was an employee. Anything created during her time at Synapse belongs to the company under standard employment agreements. Eleanor, who had been silent beside me, spoke for the first time. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the tension like glass. We have, of course, reviewed the standard employment agreement, Daniel. However, the core IP related to the Nexus engine's unique architecture and underlying code was developed by Ms. Hale prior to her formal employment with Synapse Solutions. She retained clear ownership of this pre-existing intellectual property. While she integrated it into the platform under an implied license during her tenure, there is no signed agreement transferring outright ownership of that foundational, pre-existing work to the company. Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. Daniel looked like he'd been physically struck. Mitchell finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper, confirming the technical reality. We haven't been able to reverse engineer it. Not fully. It's too customized. We don't understand the underlying logic well enough to fix the root issues. One of the board members, a man named Alan who looked particularly haggard, turned to Daniel. Daniel, you assured us repeatedly that the technology was fully transferable, that there were no single points of failure, that we could scale independently of any one individual. Daniel swallowed hard, his face pale. I believe that was the case. Aurora turned back to me. Riley, if you had stayed, what steps would you have taken to ensure the system's sustainability and transferability? I answered honestly. I consistently advocated for dedicated internal training programs specifically on the Nexus engine's architecture, the creation of a deep knowledge base, and bringing in senior technical talent specifically to learn and eventually co-manage that system with me. None of those suggestions were prioritized. The focus was always on building new features on top, not shoring up the foundation. Eleanor slid a printed email chain across the table. At the top, a reply from Daniel was clearly highlighted. It was in response to one of my proposals for a dedicated documentation sprint and training program. Looks great, Jess, but not a priority right now. We need to focus resources on feature development for the Apex deal. We'll fix the documentation post-funding. The evidence was undeniable. Daniel's own words condemned him. Aurora took a slow breath and addressed the board members directly. Gentlemen, I believe the situation is clear. The integrity and future viability of Synapse Solutions' core product, and thus the company itself, rely on a critical system that the current leadership team does not understand and cannot manage. This system was built by Ms. Hale, who retained ownership of its underlying IP, and who was subsequently dismissed and, frankly, misrepresented by the current CEO. She paused, her gaze sweeping over the table, finally resting on Daniel. As investors with a significant stake, we propose two immediate actions. First, a formal correction of the record regarding Ms. Hale's foundational contribution to Synapse Solutions. Second, a formal licensing agreement for the use of the Nexus engine IP, negotiated with Ms. Hale and her counsel, ensuring fair compensation and clear attribution. Another investor, his voice sharp, added, and Daniel. Aurora didn't hesitate. That, gentleman, is for the board to decide, effective immediately. Daniel looked at me then, his face stripped of all arrogance. He was just a man who had made a terrible mistake and was now facing the consequences. He looked cornered, defeated. I said nothing. I didn't have to. The truth, armed with documentation and timing, had spoken for itself. 2 weeks after that meeting, the news broke. Synapse Solutions announces leadership restructuring amidst technical challenges. The press release was carefully worded, but the tech blogs filled in the blanks immediately. Daniel Cross was out as CEO, transitioning to an advisory role that everyone knew meant he was gone. Meanwhile, a different name was suddenly prominent: Riley Hale. The tech community buzzed with the story, the co-founder, the architect of the core technology, the one they let go just before it all went wrong. It felt surreal. After years of being the technical co-founder in the background, My name was now synonymous with the essential, irreplaceable brain behind Synapse. Aurora Vance reached out again. This time, the conversation wasn't about the past crisis, but the future. Riley, she said, a hint of genuine warmth in her voice. The board has unanimously voted. We need stable, competent technical leadership. We need someone who understands the foundation and can rebuild trust, both internally and with clients. We want to offer you the position of Chief Technology Officer. Full control over the engineering team, direct reporting to the board, and you name your terms for both the role and the licensing of the Nexus engine. CTO. Full control. Name my terms. The girl who'd been told she wasn't polished enough was being handed the keys to the kingdom she helped build. I didn't answer immediately, letting the weight of the offer settle. It wasn't just a job. It was a validation of everything Daniel had denied. Later that day, as if on cue, my phone rang. Daniel. I hadn't spoken to him since the meeting. I let it ring twice, then answered. Hi, Daniel. My voice was neutral. He sounded tired, smaller than I'd ever heard him. Riley. I wanted to call and say thank you. Thank me? For what? For not destroying me in there. For not making it worse than it was. You did that yourself, Daniel, I replied, not unkindly, just stating the simple truth. He sighed, a long, shaky sound. I know. I got caught up, Riley. In the optics, the image. I was so focused on the spotlight, I didn't see the foundation. I didn't see you. Not really. Not what you built, what you meant to the company. His voice cracked slightly. I'm sorry, Riley. Truly. A year ago, those words would have broken me. I might have cried, raged, or felt a fierce, vengeful satisfaction. But now, hearing his apology, I felt stillness. The intense emotions had burned away, leaving only the quiet, hard-won reality. I appreciate the apology, Daniel, I said genuinely. And I truly hope you learn from this. For your sake. I will, he said. I already have. We hung up. There was nothing left to say. That evening, I met with Eleanor. We finalized the licensing agreement for the Nexus engine. It was airtight, ensuring royalties for every instance the technology was used by Synapse and clear, undeniable attribution. More importantly, a public statement would be released by Synapse Solutions the following week, correcting the historical record and acknowledging my role as the primary architect of their core platform. I would no longer be a ghost. The next morning, I walked back into the Synapse Solutions office. It looked the same, the glass walls, the desks, the familiar buzz. But it felt different. Heads turned as I passed. Whispers followed, but not the kind born of gossip or pity. These felt like respect. Ethan, my former intern, now looking relieved and hopeful, walked over, grinning. Riley? You're back. His eyes were wide. In a way, Ethan, I said, smiling back. I'm back. Later that afternoon, I stood before the entire technical team. They looked tired, stressed, but also expectant. I didn't talk about blame or mistakes. I talked about the future. We're rebuilding, I told them, my voice strong and clear. Not just the code, but the culture. We're going to document everything. We're going to train each other. We're going to build something sustainable, something we all understand, something we can be proud of. It wasn't about revenge for being fired. It was about reclaiming my creation, demanding the recognition that was rightfully mine, and rebuilding the dream the right way, this time on a foundation of truth, confidence, and respect. The power wasn't in having brought Daniel down, but in having built something so essential that they had to admit they couldn't function without me. And now, that power was being used not for destruction, but for creation, for fixing what was broken, and for building a future where the architects weren't erased, but celebrated. This was just the beginning.